Good afternoon, everyone. It is SBR, SportsBookReview.com. I'm Matt Ryan, filling in for Lee Martin. Lee Martin out today because she needs to prepare for the Jake Paul-Tyron Woodley fight physically, mentally, and emotionally. And Dave Mannion is on vacation, but don't worry, they'll be back next week for more hard-hitting, face-punching action, and we'll be breaking down the card today for UFC Vegas 35, Edson Barboza against Giga Chikadze, and talking the fights with me, as always, from Scraptitude, it's Jack Zampillo. Jack, how are you?
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me on, Matt.
Not a problem. I'm always down to talk to fights with somebody with a different perspective, and also someone who, if we merged our facial hair together, would have one concurrent goatee. But folks, talking about facial hair just reminds me that the NFL season is a mere few days away. We are near kickoff for the NFL season and also the kickoff for the NCAA season, and we want you to join in the fun. Our own Lee Martin is doing this, and you know what? I might do this too. We've got a football picks contest, a pick six contest for the NFL and the NCAA. You see down below, $50,000 plus in season-long cash prizes and $1,600 per week given away from our friends and yours, us here at Sportsbook Review. If you want to be a part of it, head to sbrpicks.com/pick6. Once again, that's sbrpicks.com/pick6. Speaking of picks, it is time to go back to the UFC Apex. It is time to go over UFC Vegas 35. But before we go forward, we've got to go back and we got to take a look at last week's card. Jared Cannonier and Kelvin Gastelum. I called this one. I picked Jared Cannonier, so I had a good night at the office. Jack, how was it for you?
I had Jared Cannonier winning this fight as well. It kind of played out the way that I expected it to in terms of Cannonier controlling the pace over the course of 25 minutes. I tried to stay away from this card on the betting front, Matt, if I'm being honest. All the odds were so close. There was nobody that was over a minus 200 favorite, but the only bet I cashed out on was Ignacio Bahamondes at plus money. But in terms of Jared Cannonier versus Kelvin Gastelum, I thought it was a fantastic fight. It was actually pretty close on the scorecards. Kelvin Gastelum actually outlanded Jared Cannonier. But nonetheless, I thought Cannonier did a great job of using his footwork to kind of keep Kelvin off his rhythm.
For ourselves on rhythm, taking a look at the chat really quick. Thanks to Justin Villegas for chatting as always, for not a first time, but a long time viewer of the show. And Aaron saying, good luck, Matt. Great analysis, but not as good looking. I tend to disagree. But Esteban, our producer over in the studio, it's time to talk about our first fight of the day in the middleweight division. Makhmud Muradov going up against Gerald Meerschaert. And Jack, taking a look at this fight, the odds right now, Muradov is a minus 600 to Meerschaert's plus 400. That is an interesting line there. What's your take on the line? And more importantly, what's your take on this fight?
I'm surprised by the line, but I agree with it in the sense that I think Muradov is going to win this fight pretty handedly. I've always thought of Gerald Meerschaert as a tough, formidable opponent, but then he fought Khamzat Chimaev, and it only took Chimaev one punch to put his lights out. Meerschaert has been finished in his past two fights. Makhmudov is 3-0 in the UFC with 2 performance of the night earning finishes. I think he takes this one by finish in the first or second round.
And win by TKO, he's 68%, Muradov is. He's won 68% of his fights by knockout or TKO. And then you take a look at this fight, I'm inclined to agree with you. Muradov has won his last 14 fights, 11 of them by knockout or TKO. All 3 of his UFC fights, though, have gone to the third round. So if you're looking for a prop here, Jack thinks it's going to end in the first round. I think this one's going to go a little bit deeper. Yeah, Meerschaert, he's coming off a round 1 submission against Bartosz Fabinski, but that was predicated by 2 straight TKO losses to Khamzat Chimaev and Ian Heinisch. Meerschaert 5-5 in his last 10, with 3 of those losses being by stoppage. So if you're looking to place a bet on this fight, The stoppage is the best option here, but also be sure to look around. Head over to sbrpicks.com, head over to sportsbookreview.com, and take a look there. And also check out Dave's picks at sbr.com/MMA, and that'll have it there. But a fun stat here, 12 of Muradov's fights, they've gone to the third round. He's knocked out 17, submitted 3, and 5 decision wins. He is 5-2 when it goes to the scorecards. On the other side of it, Meerschaert is 3-5. So if you think this fight is going to go to the decision, good luck on you. But I would put money on Muradov there. Taking a look at the chat really quick, just in case, Aaron, that was a good Godzilla reference, Giga being one of Godzilla's enemies. So we're getting some kaiju info in the chat. But let us know in the chat and the comments what you think and who you think is going to be walking out with the win this Saturday night. Moving on, also in the middleweight division, it's Andre Petroski going up against a gentleman, Michael Gilmore. And heading into this fight, Gilmore at plus 375, Petroski a minus 500 favorite. There's some wild lines here in the first couple of fights. Let's take a look at really quick at Petroski. It's his UFC debut. He is 5-1 as a pro fighter, coming off a TKO loss, his first pro loss to Aaron Jeffrey in October of last year. That ended a 5-fight winning streak, all of those by stoppage. An interesting thing to note here, Jack, is that entering this fight, Petroski has never entered, as all the submission wins have come in the first round. He has yet to see a third round as a pro fighter. And then you take a look at Gilmore, who's 6-3. This is also his UFC debut. He's riding a 3-fight winning streak into this fight, 1 off a KO and 2 decision wins. All his losses have come by way of choke in the first 2 rounds. So that's an interesting thing there. When we're inside the UFC Apex, we're going up against a guy like Petroski. He's got a litany of submission wins, all of them in the first round, and Gilmore giving up all of his losses in the first 2 rounds by submission. Not a easy thing to do. He's not fought Gilmore since January of 2020. He was supposed to fight last October against Greg Sizemore, but that fight was canceled. Let's take a look at the last 5 for Petroski. Wins over James Parker and Jesse James in 2019 by submission. He got a win over Shedrick Goodridge in 2019, a win over Andre Hall by TKO, and that aforementioned knockout loss to Aaron Jeffrey. Jack, what's your thoughts on this? I'm leaning Petroski. That line is just really interesting to me. It's very juiced.
I'm going to agree with you on this one, Matt. I think Andre Petroski has all the tools to be a successful fighter in the UFC. I remember seeing him on The Ultimate Fighter when they were introducing the contestants, when we were getting to know a little bit about them. I really liked what Andre brought to the table. I thought he was going to go pretty far in the competition. Unfortunately, he was knocked out. I'm not sure entirely the exact week. But I think, like I said, he has the tools to be successful not only in this fight, but in the UFC throughout the course of his career. All 5 of his wins, like you said, Matt, have come by finish. I'm looking at Petroski to get the job done by submission. Like you stated, all 3 of Gilmore's professional losses have come by submission. So that is a very, very gorgeous line I might want to hit there.
And once again, the line for that fight, Andre Petroski a minus 500 favorite and Michael Gilmore a plus 375 underdog. Some juicy lines. If you're looking for a parlay piece and you want to risk your money, you want to risk it all, you can take a look at that. But we're moving from the middleweight division to the welterweight division in a fight that, under other circumstances, could be a main event or a co-main event on a fight night card. We've got Kevin Lee, the Motown Phenom, making his return to the octagon to take on Daniel D-Rod Rodriguez. Lee, who is 18-6 in his career, is a minus 147 favorite. Rodriguez a plus 127 underdog. Jack, we'll start with you. What's your take on this fight? And more importantly, do you think that Kevin Lee can bounce back here after that loss to Charles Oliveira just about 18 months ago?
Well, welcome back to Kevin Lee. I think this is a much needed change of scenery for him, who was just never able to win the big one at 155 pounds. He's got a lot of talent. He's got a lot of upside. But my question is, how does he fare at 170 pounds? Does the size make a difference? Will he have to change the way he normally approaches a fight? when a guy moves up, it's kind of hard to gauge how their skills will translate until we actually see it. But I do see Kevin Lee coming into this fight very motivated, looking to get a win back on his record. But Daniel Rodriguez is no slouch. He's a tough southpaw to deal with. He's got heavy hands, and I expect him to be very active on the feet. Kevin's best bet in this fight is to do everything he can to get it to the mat. The wrestling has always been his bread and butter, and I think he will be able to do so if he can wear on Daniel Rodriguez throughout the course of 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm going to lean Kevin Lee by decision here.
Yeah, this is an interesting fight. We haven't seen Lee since the loss to Oliveira. He's lost 4 of his last 6. 2 by submission. 3 of those by submission. To Oliveira, to RDA, a unanimous decision loss to Al Iaquinta, and then a loss to Tony Ferguson. Kevin Lee goes up against killers. He is a guy that's walking into the cage anytime. He'll take on anybody, and he's tried to become the face of several divisions in the UFC. But for Rodriguez, he's got a 2-fight winning streak. Yeah, they're against Mike Perry and Preston Parsons. You talk about level and quality of opponent. It leans way more in Lee's favor, but this is his first fight in over a year and a half. Gotta wonder how adjusting to the apex and the smaller cage will be for him and trying to figure out how to be a part of that. It's an interesting transition for a guy like Kevin Lee, who at one point was going to be one of the elites in the UFC, had an interim title fight against Tony Ferguson. That's where he got that loss. I believe it was in Detroit about 3-4 years ago.
Had success in that fight as well.
Yeah, he had a good effort in that fight, but it's hard to beat Tony Ferguson, man. It's hard to beat a game Tony Ferguson. And, you know, Rodriguez is 5-1 in the UFC. He's knocked out 8. He's pulled 4 submissions, and he's been able to be he's 3-2 when it goes to the scorecards. I'm leaning towards Rodriguez here. I'm going to take the underdog. I think that Kevin Lee has the best probability of winning, but when you see how Rodriguez has been developing, and this is kind of, and we're going to talk about it, and I think the Meerschaert fight is also one of these gatekeeping fights. These UFC veterans going up against the younger talent, and since you have to have 9,362 UFC cards a year because we can only pay the fighters 18% of their income because economy, you need to create these opportunities for these younger fighters to get burned and make $20,000. But yeah, if you're taking a look again in the odds, Kevin Lee at -147, Daniel Rodriguez at +127. Taking a look at the chat real quick, Justin Villegas saying Daniel Rodriguez is a good underdog. If you want an underdog, this is a good one. Lee had potential to be top 5, but now I don't know. He's more bark than he is bite. That's a fair point to say. You know, Kevin Lee's got a lot to build up to do. He's got a lot of work to do to build himself back up, and hopefully we see it. Hopefully for some of our fans out there who are looking at Rodriguez, it doesn't come this go round. But let's move on to our bantamweight fight. The next one up here, we've got Pretty Ricky Turcios going up against Brady Bam Bam Hiestand, and it's a battle of quality nicknames. We've got some quality nicknames here, and this is the bantamweight finale. This is the bantamweight fight in the finale of The Ultimate Fighter. They have done the fusion dance, and they have merged the Ultimate Fighter finale and a UFC Vegas card because they couldn't fit it in with all the other fights going on, all the other important stuff they have to do. So we're solving it in the bantamweight co-main and in the co-main. Heading into this fight, Turcios is a -160 favorite, and Hiestand is a +130 underdog. These guys, they have not fought in a bigger fight since 2020. Both of them coming off of wins, but if you're looking at Hiestand, he is 4 of his last 5 in terms of fights, winning 3 of them, pardon me, by submission or TKO. So that's a big thing for Hiestand. And then you take a look at Pretty Ricky Turcios. He has coming off a win over Caleb Pettery in 2020 with a submission, and obviously making his way to the Ultimate Fighter finale. And then you have Josh Paiva, his last win before that. In between there, a loss to Leomana Martinez in 2018 by TKO. For me, Jack, the question of the Ultimate Fighter finale is these guys have been fighting in this atmosphere the entire time, but having to deal with all of the reality show stuff, all of the things that come with the Ultimate Fighter that we've seen for nearly 20 years at this point. Do you think that's going to wear on them? And do you think that the better fighter may lose to the more prepared fighter, the one that's been able to acclimate quicker to their surroundings?
I'd like to think that the healthier fighter will win the. You talk about these guys have been training, fighting for a couple months now, a few months now, and they haven't had a lot of time off. So it's like, what kind of injuries do these guys have? And they may not be severe, but what kind of lurking injuries may they have going into this fight? And it's an interesting point that you bring up and I didn't really think about it, because these guys were in a certain atmosphere, fighting in a certain atmosphere for X amount of months, and now you're moving them to the big stage on ESPN on a stacked main card. Will the bright lights get to them? Are they worn out? How does their cardio look at this point? There are a ton of questions surrounding both of these guys, and there are a ton of questions coming into any Ultimate Fighter finale.
Yeah, and you got to pick for this fight. What are you looking? Where are you riding? Who are you riding with?
I really like, how do you pronounce the last name? Turcios? I'm terrible with pronunciation.
I believe it's Turcios.
Turcios? Okay, that makes more sense.
If there's someone in the
chat really high.
Say it right, let us know.
Turcios is someone that I'm really high on. He convincingly won both of his fights on the show. He fights with a really nice high guard. He reminds me of Peter Yan a little bit. He's very light on his feet, very precise with his striking. He mixes things up well, and the thing that I was most impressed by watching his fights on The Ultimate Fighter was how every strike he threw had purpose. You see a lot of guys in the UFC throw feints, things that aren't really meaningful, just to get their opponent moving one way or another. And while that's effective, a guy like Turcios, a high volume guy who can implement purpose into every single one of his strikes, is a tough guy to deal with. I like Brady Hiestand. I did not expect him to get to this point, but he deserves to be here. But I'm leaning Turcios, probably by late finish or decision.
Well, here's something that might muck up the works a little bit in your pick. Turcios has fought in the Dana White Contender Series before. He faced Boston Salmon back in 2017, lost by unanimous decision. So when you talk about the bright lights, you talk about the pressure, these are the exact same conditions that Turcios is walking into on Saturday. You got to wonder if that's going to have a negative effect. This is a stay away fight for me. It's a little too close to call, too many variables. But if you're looking for a parlay piece here, I would definitely look at Hiestand and trying to roll him in and maybe try to take the decision as part of that. You got to look at both of these guys. All but one fight has ended in a stoppage for Hiestand, so that's an interesting stat there. But he's coming off his last pro fight, his last non-UFC fight, his last Ultimate Fighter fight, was a TKO loss to Chad Enninger. And his last fight came in February of 2020, where he pulled an RNC against Shane Sargent. This is going to be an interesting night for both of these guys. But if you're looking at a parlay piece, I'm looking at the underdog here. I'm looking at Brady Hiestand. And then now we're moving on to the final co-main event, the final finale of the evening in the middleweight division. Bryan battle with the most effective name, the best MMA, unless his last name was Rear Naked Choke. You couldn't get a better last name than that. Going up against Gilbert Urbina in the middleweight finals of the Ultimate Fighter. And let's take a look at the odds real quick. Walking into this fight right now, according to Bet Online, the odds are Battle's a -161 favorite, Urbina a +131 underdog. Not a huge advantage here, but Pooh Bear walking into this fight in his last couple, he's coming off a win over Ben Fowler earlier this year by submission, while we've seen Urbina's travel to the tournament, to the finale of the Ultimate Fighter. His last fight was in 2019, a win over Angelo Trevino by unanimous decision. When you take a look at these two fighters, Battle's won his last 4 fights, 3 of them by submission, 1 by TKO, so he's looking for the finish. That's going to be an interesting thing here in this co-main event. is looking for the finish going to cost him? Is that going to be one of those things where he's headhunting, trying to pull for a submission, and then Pooh Bear gets locked in? His only pro loss was a submission, so he's been tapped out before. And Urbina's got 2 submissions on his record. They make up a third of his 6 pro victories, only 1 TKO. But in terms of activity, this is the most activity I think Urbina's had in his pro career, because he's averaged only a fight between 2015 and 2020, and then you're being dropped right into the Ultimate Fighter tournament amidst everything going on with the pandemic, the lockdown, and then immediately going into a tournament like this where you're away from your friends, you're away from your family. You got to wonder if that's the wear and tear. For me, this fight is all Pooh Bears to lose, and it's not just because he's got a fantastic nickname, but Bryan Battle's my pick for this one, and I think he's going to take it, and I think he's going to pull a submission win here and get the stoppage.
You love to see a guy like Bryan Battle make it to the finals, right? He was one of the last picks in the draft. He wasn't expected to be here, but here he is. He has the biggest opportunity of his life this far, riding the momentum of 2 dominant wins. He doesn't stand out atop the rest of the contestants talent-wise from everything that I've read, but from what I've seen, he's very coachable, he's very well-rounded, and he can adjust to any sort of fight that is presented to him very well. I'm going to lean Bryan Battle on this one too, Matt. Not sure about the submission, but I'm probably going to stay away from this one, but I like Bryan Battle.
And if you want your punch and parlay, hit up _D_Mannion on Twitter, and be sure to ask Dave for his punch and parlay and see if he's in line with us. And also check out Lee Martin's article at sportsbookreview.com later this week, and she'll give you all the goods on what she's thinking in case you want to have a little bit of a cross-reference. You want that second, third, or fourth opinion from me and Jack here. Be sure to do that over at sportsbookreview.com. And let's move on to our main event. Let's move on. Let's not waste anybody's time. Let's not waste anybody's energy. You're getting tired of me already. It's our main event in the featherweight division. Edson Barboza, the OG, triple OG of the UFC, going up against Giga Chikadze. This one is going to be a banger. Let's take a look at the odds real quick. And wow, this one's an interesting one right now, Jack. Barboza -119, Chikadze -101. The odds makers are split on this one heading into Saturday night, and it's in a main event. It's a situation where you're looking at this and you're like, sure, I might not, there's not a bad pick to be found here, especially when you take a look at the lines.
Edson Barboza has looked fantastic ever since he moved down to the featherweight division. I thought he beat Dan Ige in his first fight, but he's bounced back nicely. He got a win over Makhmud Americani and a win over Shane Burgos. That was a knockout win. Incredible fight, and I honestly picked Shane Burgos to win that. Edson Barboza did a lot of things that surprised me against Shane Burgos. I like Giga Chikadze a lot. He's been very impressive on this 6-fight win streak that he's currently on. His striking arsenal is incredibly deep. His kicks are deadly, and he puts it all together very well. And I do think he has a future in the featherweight division, but he hasn't fought the upper echelon yet. And Edson Barboza has been there. At 155 pounds more so, but also at 145 pounds, fighting a guy like Shane Burgos on a big stage, Dan Ige on a big stage. I think this is going to be a war. I think both guys are going to be tested early on, but in the end, I think Edson Barboza gets it done, most likely by decision, but the odds makers have this one so close justifiably, because I've been back and forth on this one for the past couple of weeks, but after looking into it, diving a little deeper, I really like what Edson Barboza has brought to the table at featherweight. I thought the weight cut was going to be a lot for him. Turns out I stand corrected. He's looked fantastic. I think he's going to turn in a hell of a performance on Saturday night.
You know what? I'm not disagreeing that he's going to put in a hell of a performance, but let's take a look at the last few fights for Edson Barboza. He's got 2 straight wins, Shane Burgos and Makhmud Americani, as you said before. Prior to that, though, 3 straight losses to Dan Ige, Paul Felder, and he got knocked out by Justin Gaethje. That loss to Ige was his debut at featherweight, pardon me. Lost 5 of his last 8, including to Kevin Lee by doctor stoppage and Khabib Nurmagomedov by unanimous decision. Barboza has gone up against killers at every opportunity in the UFC, and we talked about it just a minute ago about gatekeeper fights. Justin Vegas in the chat saying Giga Chikadze is going to beat Godzilla Barboza. I'm kind of inclined to go with Giga Chikadze. Chikadze has won his last 8. His last 2 wins were TKO over Cub Swanson and Jamie Simons back in November of last year. He's 6-0 in the UFC, 4 of them by decision. Yeah, this is his deepest fight yet, but I think Chikadze is up to the challenge. I think he's up for the 5 rounds. I think he's up for the opportunity, and he's someone just 3 months ago wanted to fight on short notice at UFC 262. This is a guy who's willing, ready to go, and I think he's going to bring that into the cage, and I think Barboza is going to have a little bit of trouble catching up to him, but it's going to be a good fight either way, and you are not making a bad pick right now at those lines for either fighter. Is going to be interesting to see how those lines shift between now and the weigh-ins on Friday, because you got to wonder, Barboza made the drop to featherweight. Got to wonder if that's going to be a problem for him if he's able to maintain at 145. But let us know in the chat who you think's going to win. Let us know if you think that one of these guys is going to get a little fakakta and miss weight. Let us know in the chat, and be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. I didn't say that already. I should have, but you need to like, follow, and subscribe. Ring the like button. Ring that notification bell. Be sure next time we're on the air or any of the great shows at SBR Sportsbook are available for you. We've got the MLB, we got the NBA, we got NHL, everything that is in sports we've got here at SBR Sports Picks. But now, talking about picks, let's go to our top prelim picks for the card. And Jack, taking a look at this card, we've got some interesting fights here. We've got a returning Wellington Thurman against Sam Alvey. We've got Alessio DeShirico going up against Abdul Razak Al Hassan. We've got Jamal Emmers on the card. We've got some pretty fun stuff in the pipeline. But I need to know what fight you, yes, you, Jack Zampillo of Chicago, Illinois, think is the fight to watch on the prelims Saturday night.
First of all, I appreciate the Chicago shout-out. Represent the Windy City. But my prelim of the night is going to be Abdul Razak Al Hassan versus Alessio DeShirico. Razak Al, is that how you pronounce it? Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Yes, I got that correct. Al Hassan has a lot of knockout power. He always brings the fight to his opponents. And DeShirico is coming off of a very impressive knockout win over Joaquin Buckley early on this year, back in January. I'm looking forward to this one. I think we're going to see a lot of back and forth exchanges in the pocket. Give me DeShirico.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. And taking a look here, I think that DeShirico fight is good. I think that's going to be a fun fight. Mine is the light heavyweight fight, because I got to pick the big boys. Anytime there's a big boy fight on the card, you know your boy Matt Ryan's going to pick it. Dustin Jacoby going up against Darren Stewart. I'm picking Jacoby in that one. But, you know, Sam Alvey against Wellington Thurman, that's going to be a fun fight to watch. Anytime you can see a guy named Wellington get punched in the face, it's a good time. Nothing against Wellington Thurman. It's just fun to say out loud. But if you want to learn more about these fights and you want to learn how to pick in these fights, go to sbrpicks.com/UFC. That's sbrpicks.com/UFC for the latest up-to-date odds, news, and info from Lee Martin and Dave Mannion. That is, once again, sbrpicks.com/UFC. And now that we've gotten through the main card and the prelims, it's time for the segment that gives us the most anxiety. It's time for the lock of the week, brought to you by My Crippling Anxiety. And Jack, when it comes to the lock of the week, what is your stone cold lock of the week, of the pick of the century, of the month?
Andre Petroski versus Michael Gilmore. I'm taking Petroski as my lock of the card. Listen, I really like what he brings to the table. He's here for a reason. He's getting this opportunity after losing on The Ultimate Fighter for a reason. He finishes fights. He always brings it to his opponents. I'm looking for him to take this one to the ground and pound Gilmore out.
No, that's an interesting one. Interesting. I hate this part of it, but I think my lock is going to be Daniel Rodriguez. I'm going to take Daniel Rodriguez as my lock. I think walking into this fight, he's got the most to gain out of anybody on this card that's not someone fighting for a UFC contract. Him or Chikadze have the most to gain outside of, you know, the middleweight and the bantamweight fights, making up the and Coco main event. But, you know, Rodriguez's record, the run he's been on, and the opportunity there, I feel like he's going to seize it. I don't think Kevin Lee's I don't think since the loss to Tony Ferguson, he hasn't been the same fighter. He's been dealing with a lot of injuries. He's been dealing with changing weight classes. I think Rodriguez is going to be in the pocket, and he's going to get the win on Saturday night. But the fun part of this show is telling us if we're right or we're wrong. So be sure in the comments to let us know what you think, what your picks are, and some of the things we may have missed in the analysis. We're not going to get everything right, but we're going to get most things right. So we want you to fill in the blanks, and the easiest way to do that is to comment in the chat or drop something in the comments after this. We give them a read. We cry a little. I drink it with a bottle of wine. I read it with a bottle of wine in my hand, but we do read the comments. And let's take a look at the chat really quick. Kylie Reynolds from the Windy City, watching us from Chicago. Justin Villegas saying a lock is Sam Alvey, but sad to say, Turman sucks. That's some spicy words. Justin Villegas also saying Al Hassan wins. If he loses, he gets the pink slip. Well, the UFC is running through fighters like a rototiller. So you know what? Anything can happen. I think I just got fired from the UFC. And
Jimmy Rivera just got cut from the UFC.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Jimmy Rivera's getting cut. That's when you know.
They're trying to make that They're trying to make that 18 into a 14 real quick. But if you got anything else for us, let us know in the comments. You can follow Jack on Twitter at Jack_Zampillo15. That is Jack_ZAMPILLO15 on the Twitter machine. And you can listen to him on Scraptitude. You can follow me on Twitter at MRyan Consulting. You can follow SBR Sports Picks on Instagram at SBR Sports Picks. The same thing on the Twitter machine. And be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more gambling and sports betting goodness. And folks, just because we're done doesn't mean we're done. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Go to sbrpicks.com/UFC for the up-to-date information. Follow Dave Mannion at @DMannion_ for his punch and parlay a little later this week. And also be sure to follow Lee Martin on Twitter at Lee Martin Sports. That's Lee, L-E, Martin Sports. I know I'm not prettier than Lee. I'm not as pretty as Lee. But you know what? I have a mustache, and that counts for something. Shout out to Esteban on the other side of the glass for being a fantastic producer and being someone who makes sure we get on the air on time and have a good time. So until next time, I'm Matt Ryan for Jack Zampillo and everybody here at SBRSportsbookReview.com. We'll see you on the other side, and so long from the Garden State.